Well, welcome into the first episode of a brand new mini series on the Dealing the Cards channel, where each Friday one of us will answer your questions that you've submitted on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, membership channel, all the different pathways, so that we could talk about topics that are pressing on your mind about Cardinal baseball right now, big picture, all the things that we might not necessarily be able to address on a typical episode. So let's jump into this new Q&A on Dealing the Cards. Well, this week it's myself, Josh, who's going to be on for answering the questions. And we've got a diverse set of questions that were submitted thanks to you guys on Twitter, YouTube, and then our channel membership. And we're going to prioritize those questions as they come through, but we'd like to answer as many as we can in these episodes. And kind of the point of these Fridays ones is this is kind of a chill, relaxed, pre-recorded episode where one of us is able to hop on here and kind of think through some of these questions in advance instead of kind of reacting in real time on the chat in our live streams. And also, we know some of you aren't able to make those live streams either. And so this is a pathway for you to be able to ask those questions and get us to work them in a different way. We've always said that we can do that, but it's a little bit difficult when we have kind of pre-recorded topics or things we want to do with guests. But you can always submit these now. One of the best ways to do this going forward is to just comment on the video from the week prior. So if you have a question for next week's Q&A, you can throw it on here, but then we'll probably do community posts, Twitter posts, we'll definitely throw it in the Discord. And if you want to be a channel member, you can join. The best way to do that is on the YouTube channel on a platform like internet platform instead of your phone. Once you subscribe, it gives you the option to become a channel member. And just for like $1 a month, you can be in our Discord, but then there's other membership perks as well. So that's really fun, and we hope you do that. Please subscribe, like the video, it helps out a ton. And especially let us know, like, do you like this format? Do you want more content like this? Because if you don't, we don't need to do it, but we figured people would enjoy this. So we'll just jump into some questions. But first, I'll react to last night's game briefly. Cardinals dropped, man, game one of the Cubs series. It felt like a brutal loss. Obviously, Ryan Helsley gave up that home run to Cody Bellinger. Then an RBI double to Dansby Swanson, RBI double to Mike Tauchman to lose the game. Overall thoughts, I felt like I was encouraged to an extent by the Cardinal offense last night because they just can't hit left-handed pitching. Shota Imanaga just hasn't been himself since, honestly, like the beginning of the season. Like, he was electric and he's kind of come back down to earth. But he's still a really good left-handed starter, and Paul Goldschmidt had a great night. Nolan Arenado had a good night. Like, they're able to hit the left-handed pitching and put up 4 runs. And I mean, you want like kind of the litmus test for this Cardinals offense. So they put up 5 or more runs, then I don't really blame the offense ever. 4 is kind of like that, like in between mark. If they score 3 or less runs, though, I expect more out of them. So to put 4 runs on Imanaga was encouraging. They didn't get to the Cubs bullpen, though, which is not encouraging. And then obviously Ryan Helsley kind of faltered there, and he's oddly not great against the Cubs as of late. But I'm not super concerned about that, if I had to be honest. Like, I honestly feel like in general, like, we overreact mostly, or at least I think we kind of act like a walk-off loss is the worst thing ever every time, and that it's never happened in the history of the world. And like, now this team is failing, and what do we do? And I mean, unless you're going to go Brad Lidge and have like a perfect season, which I think he had a perfect season, or he at least had the longest save streak in MLB history. But I thought in 2008 for the Phillies, he didn't blow a save or something like that. But like, that happens, right? And I know the kind of way you blow a save matters, but like, Helsley's been so good this year that I'm not going to freak out that he blew a save against the Cubs. It is frustrating though, and it would have been a great way to win. I mean, obviously that'd been a huge game 1 win, and then to maybe go for a sweep in the series or to take 3 of 4. Now you have to win 3 straight to take 3 of 4, so it's more likely you split or lose a series. So that's just like stuff like that is frustrating for sure. And this Cardinal team is competing with a lot of teams in the National League right now for the wild card, and they're trying to catch up to the Brewers. So every game matters. I'm just not like big picture worried about the club, like it seems like some people are right now. So that's kind of my 2 cents on it. I don't know. Let me know if you think differently on that. But honestly, in general, I don't really think that it's a huge deal, if I'm being honest. So I don't know. Maybe I'm not worried enough about stuff like that. But anyways, let's jump into some of the questions. And the first one I'm actually going to present on here and show. So if you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see what I'm showing here, because the questions related to Cardinal payroll a little bit here. And I felt like that was something that people would want to talk about a little bit. So I know it won't be the biggest thing in the world, but one of the things I recommend people check out First of all, is just the reporting of current like Cardinal beat writers and people who cover the team, because for the most part, they're going to be the ones who have the better. Like Derek Gould does an incredible job of talking about payroll, because clubs just don't they don't give away all the numbers on stuff. So some of the stuff isn't super accurate all the time. I definitely don't recommend Spot Track. Like that's just not the one to go to. I used to go to that, but just kind of talking to people and figuring out what's what, like they seem to be very inaccurate. But one of the best websites out there to kind of get a feel for payroll would be Fangraphs, in my opinion. And so I had a question from Dizzy Drewster on our channel membership. And so, Drizzy, appreciate you, man, Drewster. Always love talking with you in the chat in our member channel. But his question is more of an ask. He's like, can you look at Arenado's contract? When looking at it, it shows it's about 24 million next year. Keeps going down, but everyone says it's 32.5. Even Spot Track says he's only 25.55 against the luxury tax. So what exactly is the contract? Because I also think Arenado or Colorado has $5 million in the next 3 years coming to help pay that as well. Well, I'm confused too. I think we're all kind of confused by Nado's contract, but more so like it's just complicated and weird. And so to my best understanding, and to the best understanding that I feel like has been reported out there, if you look at like kind of the guaranteed salaries, the Cardinals right now, Arenado's is technically owed 35 million overall. But if you scroll down here, it says the Cardinals are getting $5 million in the next 3 years. So 2024, 2025, and 2026 from the Colorado Rockies to pay that down a little bit. Also getting $6 million from the White Sox to pay for Eric Fetty and Tommy Pham was nice. But okay, so if that's true, then you kind of look at each of these numbers and it's like, okay, so his total money that Arenado is getting this year is 35 million. But you take away 5 million because the Rockies are paying some of that. So the Cardinals in 2024 should be paying Arenado about 30 million. 2022 paying about 27 million, 2026 paying him 22 million, and then 2027 they're not getting any money from the Rockies, so the Cardinals pay him all 15 million. So one of the things I kind of take away from this, which I think is just a little bit interesting, is like with how Arenado's playing this year, 30 million is not a good value, that's for sure. But it is nice that you look at these. It's already a contract that was front loaded, so it's kind of going down in value the last few years. But you look in 2025, so next year, the Cardinals are only going to pay him 27 million of that 32. In 2026, they're only going to pay him 22 million of that 27 million. And then 2027 is 15 million. So, like, I don't know what Arenado is going to look like going forward. But the nice thing is he's not like, they're not paying him for sure 35 million every year. So, like, it's not it has a chance still to be a not great contract moving forward, and I think that's why if they try to move him in a deal right now, you're not going to get anything for him. It's why the Rockies had to pay 50 million and not get anything in return to move Arenado, even though I think it was a bad trade still, but you weren't going to be able to get anything for Arenado because of this contract. But it's something interesting to know for Cardinal fans. And then while we're talking about contracts too, I think it's important to kind of look at some of these like deals, because you look at Paul Goldschmidt's 26 million coming off the books next year, and you're like, or this year, and you're like, oh man, the Cardinals have $26 million to spend, right? It's like, well, maybe. And first of all, like before I get into this is not like I'm not defending them not spending. This is more of like when we talk about how much they're spending in payroll, I think there's probably gonna be people who this off season are gonna freak out if they don't spend and make a big move and say, how did you not do that because you had the Goldschmidt money coming off? Well, a couple things. One, they front loaded that Sonny Gray deal or backloaded that Sonny Gray deal. So he's only owed $10 million this year. So that contract goes up 15 million in 2025 and then another 10 million in 2026. And then if they want him for 2027, it's a 30 million. So like there's other contracts on their books. Wilson Contreras goes up 500,000. But that's a 15 million bump to Sonny Gray next year that kind of takes away from that Goldschmidt money coming off the books. So it's really only 11 million coming off the books from Goldschmidt's. But then also you look down here at players eligible for arbitration. You'll have Helsley in his third year, so he'll be worth more. Romero in his second, King in his second. So Helsley's the one that'll be a little bit bigger of a number. But then where it really starts getting like maybe not as much for 2025, but the years to come is that Nootbaar, Donovan, Gorman, and Palante all start arbitration next year. So you're looking at, I don't know, at least 3 million, I think, for Nootbaar, Donovan, and Gorman next year from $700,000. So that's like 9 million between the three of them, if not more for some of those guys. So that's where I think sometimes we don't always bake in where the numbers are going and the prices of players and all that kind of stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle like the team options for like a Kyle Gibson or Lance Lynn, Keenan Middleton next year. Do they pick up all three of them? Do they pick up some of them? Obviously, they're going to get rid of Giovanni Gallegos to 6.5 million, so they'll have to pay 500,000 of that. But yeah, when we talk about payroll next year, the payroll gymnastics is something that has to kind of be thought through a little bit. It impacts things, but yeah, the Arenado deal, he is getting 25 million paid down each year. So I would check Fairgraphs if you're ever questioning that. So another question we had from YouTube comes from Eric Ledford, and he asked, "Will the Cardinals give Tink Hence a chance in 2025?" Um, this is really interesting. I don't want to say definitively yes because I don't know how he's going to be, right? Like, so the rest of the year, he's had some injury stuff this year. Um, and what do we mean by chance and when in 2025? Are you talking about spring training? I think he will have a chance, but I don't think they will go to him. And I'll get to why in a second, outside the fact of just his own development. But I think he's talented enough. I think he's on the right track that next year, at some point in the year, we'll see Tink Hence. I hope and I think, but I'm not gonna I'm not gonna be shocked if we don't. But is it in the rotation? Is it in the bullpen for a little bit? I don't know. I could see him getting some starts, maybe like the Alex Reyes when he first came up, and maybe a little bit of bullpen, or like what the Cardinals are doing at their top pitching prospects all the way back in early 2010s, right? I think sometimes people get really mad that they use some of their top arms in the bullpen, but like that's not like they've done that with good arms too that they've developed well. Like Shelby Miller's been on the bullpen for a little bit before, I think for a little bit, but for sure Carlos Martinez, for sure Michael Wacha got some bullpen action. Obviously Trevor Rosenthal turned into a reliever, and that's not what you want for Tink Hence here. But I do think Tink Hence gets a chance. I don't know if it's rotation, I don't know if it's bullpen, but I'd say it's more likely than not he gets some taste of big league action in 2025, but I wouldn't say it's a guarantee by any means. Part of why I don't think it's a guarantee, and also why I definitely don't think it's going to be coming on a spring. Like he'll definitely be at spring training, but why I don't think it'll be an opening day thing this year, or he'll be truly competing for a rotation spot. First, Quinn Matthews, I think, is maybe a little bit more. And like he might have, he might. I don't know if it's this. There's a chance Quinn Matthews makes it before him, which I think impacts things. But the real things I think impacts it is now the Cardinals have some interesting internal pitching depth that they haven't had before, at least in the recent years. I just put up a story in Red Bird Rants today where it's under the umbrella of Michael McGreevy's start, but kind of looks big picture at like why it's important that a Michael McGreevy could be a back end rotation starter, why it's important that Andre Palante has kind of risen. It's because since 2021, the Cardinals have had almost like only 37% of the starts come from players that they've developed. And I didn't count Adam Wainwright or Lance Lynn into that. I'm talking about guys who have not hit free agency yet. So they're on pre-arbitration or arbitration contracts. And that's a kind of a problem because each year they have to go in and they have to go out and get the Lance Lynn's, the Kyle Gibsons, the Jose Quintanas, the Jordan Montgomerys, and everyone always has to add pitching, but the Cardinals have only had 3 starting pitchers since 2021 that they've developed make 10 or more starts and have an ERA lower than 5. That's bad. It's not good. And John Gant, I think, was their best starter ERA-wise since 2021 that's come up. And then I think the second one is Palante, and the third one is Jack Flaherty. And Jack like at a 4.3 or 4.5 ERA over that time frame. Not ideal. And so what could be really helpful for this Cardinal team next year is, I think you probably lock in, not probably, you lock in Sonny Gray, you lock in Eric Fedde for that rotation. I'm pretty confident at this point they're going to pick up Kyle Gibson's team options. That's 3 starter spots, and I don't think they're going to be moving Miles Michaelis. That's 4. But now, do you need to pick up Lance Lynn's contract or a club option? Could you move Steven Matz because you'll have 1 year left in his deal, and you're not going to get anything from return? But $12.5 million is not a bad contract in this market. So could they move that money and not pick up Lance Lynn's option and save $24 million right there, and have Palante as their 5th starter, and have Michael McGreevy and Gordon Graceffo as their backup options, and then behind those guys, so you have 3 AAA options already, or 3 young options already. Not that doesn't even mention Zach Thompson, Matthew Liberatore, so you could have like 5 young options right there, and then you get to the Tink Hence, Quinn Matthews of the world. Those guys could obviously surpass that group, but I think an issue going into this year would have been if their next best option after, like, let's say they had those 5 veterans and then the next guy they trusted was Tinker Quinn. I think that's playing the fire a little bit because then you might be rushing those guys, or you're putting your eggs too much in that basket. But now, like, would any of us are any of us going to be like freaking out if Andre Palante has to slot in into the fifth starter spot next year because someone got hurt? No, he's more than capable of being that guy. Um, it's too soon to say Michael McGreevy is that guy, but he looked pretty good. And so it's like, okay, I want to see that guy get more opportunities. So if he's your seventh starting option, is that crazy? Or your eighth? Then the bigger thing, which I think Cardinal fans would rather see, and I would love to see them do as well, is instead of saving money on not picking up Lynn's option and trading Steven Matz and saving like 24.5 million there. I mean, use some of that money and the Goldschmidt money that you have off the books, that like 15 million ish, when you count in the fact that Sonny Gray's contract goes up, or 10 million ish. Like, go and get a Nathan Eovaldi in free agency. Go get a Max Fried. Go get someone like that, because I think part of the reason the Cardinals have stayed away from that high end pitching market, is just I think it's risky, and I think they know that. But I think they're becoming more open to it. I think we saw that this past offseason, and they're apparently interested in Nathan Eovaldi the offseason before that. But now you've potentially have Hein Bloom in charge in October. And if they say, okay, we've got 4 veteran starters, and then behind them, we've got Palante, we've got Mike McGreevy, we've got Graceffo, we've got Libator, and we've got Thompson. So we've got 5 options that, again, if you told me this time next year that Matthew Libator, Michael McGreevy, any of those guys had to fill in for like a 10 start stretch, I'm not freaking out. I would be freaking out at the beginning of this year if a lot of those guys were doing that, except maybe Zach Thompson. But then obviously we're proving wrong on that. But it, if you have that depth, I think it allows you to go out and make a bigger move to upgrade the top of the rotation more, because the Cardinals don't have to be afraid that, hey, if Nathan Eovaldi goes down in spring training, we just spent all this money on one guy when we really needed multiple guys. I think now they can look at their rotation and say, we have a lot of guys. We can go out and get a difference maker now, or we could trade for a difference maker, right? We can move Nolan Gorman to get that, or whatever the name is. I'm not saying they should do that specifically, but I think those are some interesting things to look at. So, well, Tink Hence, I used your point to make another point too, Eric. But yes, I do think Tink Hence will get a chance to 2025, but I wouldn't guarantee it by any means, because it's just hard with young guys like that. Could be, I think 2026 is where we may see him truly blossom and have a real opportunity. But also, who knows? Maybe 2025 he inserts in the rotation and he never looks back from there. So, um, let's keep going. We've got some more listener questions that are going to come through that are really fun. I'm looking forward to this. And again, also, if you have questions right now as you're thinking through the chat, throw them in, or you're listening to the episode, throw them into the question or the description or comments, sorry, on YouTube. We'll also put out posts going forward on Twitter, X, and all the other things as well. So keep a lookout for that stuff. Next question comes in from St. Louis. He is a channel member as well, so really appreciate your question here. He said, my question is if the Cardinals are not going to play Pages a lot anymore, should they bring up Herrera, who can at least DH against lefties, versus Pages, who can only get a spot start here or there? Um, the backup catcher thing's really tough for me and interesting, because I see where the Cardinals are coming from with how Pages calls games, and the fact that he can actually throw runners out, which unfortunately, in a really weird turn of events, Ivon Herrera is like actually awful at throwing out base runners right now. And I really like Ivon Herrera. It's just it's a huge flaw in his game right now, and it's just kind of unplayable back there when teams know that they can just run wild on you. But I do think Yvonne is like a slightly below average or average framer, and he's a good blocker. So he's behind the plate. So it's not a case of him just being a bad defensive catcher. I just think he has a huge flaw when it comes to his arm right now. And I think it's a problem. So I don't really think you can really trust him behind the plate right now. At least the Cardinals don't. If the Cardinals don't, then I don't know how he's on this roster, unless he takes the spot of like a Matt Carpenter or Brandon Crawford, but we know that's not going to happen. And now they need Crawford because they don't have Tommy Edman coming back. Pages, I do think will play more than people like than what you're saying. St. Louis here is I don't know, maybe because of the fact that Tommy Pham's in there now. and the position player group is healthier, maybe we do see the DH spot used less for Wilson Contreras, maybe not as much as it was, but I do think it will be frequently, especially against left-handed pitching. I think that's when they'll actually work Pages into the lineup more. But yeah, I think part of the reason we just haven't seen Pages, I feel like we've seen him a decent amount lately, but I feel like if you don't think we've seen him as much as you were, I think part of it's because Wilson Contreras is healthy now, and Pages was playing a ton when he was out. And Ivon clearly wasn't being able to get it done behind the plate. And then also, like, when Wilson just came back, they wanted to be more careful with him and DH him a little bit more. But then also, like, it's just off the All-Star break, so they're a little bit fresher. So I think you're seeing the starters play a lot more than, like, they're not getting as much rest as maybe like Wilson will later. So I do think Pages will play a decent amount. I really like Ivon Herrera, and honestly, like, I get why they're keeping Matt Carpenter, but I could definitely make the argument that why not just put Ivon Herrera there. But I think Tommy Pham's presence now helps out a lot there. I'd like to see Ivon have a chance going forward, but I don't think that's going to be this year, unfortunately. So before we get into more questions, I did want to thank our a couple of our sponsors here. So SeatGeek, if you're planning going to a game the rest of this year, definitely use code NewtNews on SeatGeek, or if you're going to a concert or anything else, it gets you $20 off a purchase of tickets. So I mean, we all want to save money, right? And if you haven't used SeatGeek before and you use the code NewtNews, you save $20 off on a purchase of $50 or more. So if you're going to a game down the stretch where the Cardinals are trying to make the playoffs here, it's a great way to save money and to be able to catch a game or to go to a concert or something like that. So be sure to use code SeatGeek for that as well. Also want to thank 314 Sports Cards and Collectibles, who's been an awesome sponsor of this podcast. They buy, sell, and collect trading cards in the St. Louis area. A great way to check them out, and I know some of you have already done it as well, is on Instagram. That's where they're the most active social media-wise. You can see some of the new stuff they have, deals they have, all that kind of stuff. You can contact them, but also go check them out in the St. Louis area. Just Google 314 Sports Cards and Collectibles, and you can find their location, information about them, and all that kind of stuff. But if you're in, like, I just got a bunch of my old baseball trading cards back in the day that I collected, or some that my dad had collected. And so I've been going through those and kind of being like, oh, this one might be valuable, and trying to figure stuff out. So I'm going to go swing through 314 Sports Cards soon, just to kind of like see what I've got. And also check out their collections as well. So be sure to check them out and let them know that the Dealin the Cards podcast sent you. Okay. So a couple more questions on the way out. I'll address the elephant in the room, the fun one. This comes from Andrew. He asked me if I could have any two-way player, who would I want it to be on the Cardinals? I'd say Michael Lorenzen. I don't think there's a better two-way player in baseball than Michael Lorenzen. And if you're listening to me on audio and you don't see my face, I'm clearly being a jerk. I'm clearly messing with Andrew right now. Obviously, be Shohei Ohtani. So yeah, I've heard that someone say recently that watch a lot of East Carolina baseball, that when they watched Alec Burleson play, their big takeaway was that you could pitch. So who knows? Maybe Alec Burleson needs to be a pitcher, first baseman, DH, but that's not going to happen. But it'd be fun for the Cardinals to have a two-way player. I just don't imagine that happening anytime soon. So this one does come from Dylan Rollins on Dylan Rollins 39 on YouTube. He asked me what my preferred, or our preferred, outfield in 2025 is. Great question. As I was thinking through this, I was like, man, like, you could convince me of a couple different routes here. I think the clearest one to me, though, is, I would say, Nootbaar and Jordan Walker in the corners. I don't think that's much of a question. Brendan Donovan has been awesome defensively in the corner, so I could see Jordan Walker being your more DH type, or Lars Nootbaar being your more DH type, because you kind of want to like knick-knack injuries for Nootbaar. But I more think Donovan is just built to be the guy that moves around. And so I think like Donovan's your placeholder DH next year. It doesn't mean he actually DHs every day, but like some days he plays second or third or left or right. Like first, you can play all over the field. Alec Burleson's your first baseman next year instead of Paul Goldschmidt. You save that money there. Wilson Contreras your catcher, Gorms at second base, Arenado at third, Wynn at short. You have Newton Walker in the corners, and then I think it's probably Michael Ciani again in center. But I think Victor Scott will get a chance to fight for that job. And then I think you could bring back like a Tommy Pham as that platoon right-handed bat to play with Ciani or Scott, because I don't think you want either of those guys to be the everyday center fielder at this point. I don't think they've earned that necessarily, but I think well, Scott hasn't yet, but I can see a world where Scott gets that next year, but I think it's probably Ciani's job to lose, especially against right-handed pitching. Um, so I definitely lean toward Michael Ciani being the center fielder against right-handed pitching, and then you can go use Tommy Pham as that guy against left-handed pitching, or you can get someone else in free agency. Um, there's not really anyone in AAA or coming up that I would say could take that center field spot besides Victor Scott, or could partner with him there. I guess Newbar could play some center field against left-handed pitching, and then you have like Donovan in left, and because Sajasi's probably going to make his way to St. Louis next year, and so Sajasi could play against right-handed pitching or left-handed pitching more. So, but I would say my probable outfield most of the time is going to be Newton at left, Ciani in center probably, but there's a chance of Victor Scott, and then Jordan Walker in right field. And I think that's an encouraging outfield. I'm still a believer in Jordan Walker long term. I believe the Cardinals are still a believer in him long term. But yeah, he's clearly got some stuff to figure out, man, and it's tough. And he's looked better lately. It feels like you've seen like anecdotally, you like watch on like YouTube or not YouTube or YouTube or Twitter or whatever. It feels like you start seeing more Jordan Walker highlights lately. So I'm hopeful that he's starting to figure it out. But I don't know if you caught our episode of Bernie Nicholas on Wednesday, or you just kind of ask around a little bit. It just seems like there's some stuff there. And it seems like not on the Cardinals end. It feels like they are trying to help Jordan Walker out, and it's just not necessarily computing. And I'm trying to be nice now to say this, but it just seems like it's more of like on Walker's end that he's kind of got to figure it out. So I think Cardinal fans, and rightfully so, just want to blame them for whenever something goes wrong with the player now. And I feel like the Randy Rosarina, Dallas Garcia, I don't even say I want to throw Tyler O'Neill in there, like Zach Gallen, Sandy Alcantara. I think we can give them a lot of like deserved flack for how things have gone with some of their prospects and how they've let them go. Kind of in the case of like Dylan Carlson, I don't really put that on the Cardinals, because you look at his minor league stats, you're like, this guy is going to be insane. And then he just never put on the weight, and he just never figured it out. Injuries happen. Like, I don't know how much you can blame the Cardinals for that. You could maybe blame them for not selling high on him, but at the same time, like when he was a prospect, like I think we would have killed them if they trade Dylan Carlson. He looked awesome. And then when he came up in 2021, maybe that's when you should have sold high as the rookie of the year thing, because maybe at that point they should have known, like, I don't think this guy's actually going to go put on the weight like he should. And I don't know, like if he's not going to do that, then best case scenario is he's a pretty good player, all around player, and like a valuable player, but not like a superstar. Maybe that's the time you traded him. But the 2022 Juan Soto stuff, okay, like I'm going to say it again. I like saying it a lot because people just don't like. It's a unfair narrative. Dylan Carlson was not the reason the Cardinals didn't get Juan Soto. The reason the Cardinals didn't get Juan Soto is twofold. One, the Nationals wanted a really, really good pitching prospect like Mackenzie Gore that the Padres had. The Cardinals did not have that. Like Tink Hence was not viewed at that time. The Nationals did not value Matthew Liberatore. So the Padres had that trump card there. Also, go back and look at that Padres package. It's insane. It's insane. Like in baseball, you rarely get quantity and quality in a deal. Like it's only when a Juan Soto's moved. Usually you can get like one really good prospect and then some throw-ins, or you get a lot of kind of like interesting guys, but like no like true centerpiece, like steal or headliner of a deal. They got a deal full of headliners. They got CJ Abrams, they got Mackenzie Gore, they got James Wood, they got Robert Hassel. I mean, there's just a bunch of names in that deal for Juan Soto, and they had to pay Juan Soto $30 million a year the next 2 years. Like the Cardinals weren't going to do that. They weren't going to pay to that price. So the reason the Cardinals didn't get Juan Soto, not because Dylan Carlson, it's because they didn't want to give up some kind of package that would have featured not just some of, I'm saying like it would have been like this. It would have been Jordan Walker, Nolan Gorman, Mason Wynn, Dylan Carlson, Tink Hence, Matthew, like it would have been 6, 7, 8 guys that we like a lot. And again, you could like, I'm not saying if you feel like they should have still done that, considering who those guys have become so far. That's your opinion. I don't feel that way, but I get that. But don't have the narrative that it's because of Dylan Carlson, because it's just not true. It's been like Jeff Jones had a really good thread on Twitter recently. If you want that thread sent to you, message me, I'll send it to you. But he talked about how like Dylan Carlson was told he wasn't going to be traded because the deal was dead, not because they weren't going to trade Dylan Carlson, so this deal is going to die because we're saying no to trading you. It was because, hey, clearly we're not going to come to a deal with the Nationals here because the Padres are going to give them what they want and we aren't, and that's why it ended. Not because they said, "Hey, Dylan Carlson, we're not going to trade you," and the Nationals were like, "Okay, well, then we're not doing this." They said no to a much larger and crazier package than that. So sorry to get on that. My point that with Jordan Walker though is I don't think the Jordan Walker issues are the Cardinals' fault right now. I think the Cardinals have done things, and I was someone who advocated for Jordan Walker to be on the opening day roster, and it just wasn't. I don't think that was the right thing in 2022. But then again at the or 2023. But then at the end of the year, like when he came back up from Memphis, he was great and he figured it out. So I think he's got that in him. It's just not right now. So, anyways, I think that's it. I think Jordan Walker will be the right fielder next year, though, and I have confidence in him long term. And then lastly, this comes from Dylan Herrera Salas on YouTube. He said in a 3-game wildcard series, who are your starters? I go Sonny Gray, Eric Fetty, and then Kyle Gibson, unless something crazy happens, because I do think he's the most swing and miss. I think he's been dependable and good. I know Andre Plante's been good as of late, but I think it's Kyle Gibson's the lose. So again, this was really fun. I went a lot longer because I rambled on about some things and topics, but typically these will be like 15, 20-minute Q&As, probably a lot shorter. Some of the questions I think let me kind of go in different directions, but if you've got questions you want us to address next time, whether they're current live reactions to like what's going on in Cardinal baseball right now, their big picture stuff, their futuristic stuff, whatever that is, drop a comment in the YouTube section. We'll be looking for questions in there. Let us know in the comments too. Did you like this episode? Could you do without it? Like the episode if you enjoyed it, so that we know we want to do more. Subscribe if this is your first time coming to the Dealin the Cards channel. And we'll be recording on Sunday. So thanks for watching. See you next time.